amazing response to a very special event. Thank you for coming today. My name is Vicki Profit. I am the president of the Perinton Historical Society, and I also serve as director of our Fairport Museum. Welcome on behalf of the Board of Trustees of the Perinton Historical Society. This is just incredible. Thank you for being here. We are honored to have our very special guests right over here. We've got a wonderful program, and I would like to start off by thanking Jean Kelly. Raise your hand. Jean has put in countless hours in support of our veterans. It is she who set up this entire program. So thank you, Jean. What a wonderful event. Thank you. It's fitting that we're in this building. This building was constructed in 1937 as the Fairport Library, and it was a Works Progress Administration building. And it was dedicated to our World War I soldiers, you may have noticed as you came in today. And if not, as you leave, take a look to the left, the beautiful woodwork in this building that shows the dedication. We've also got an amazing mural that was done by Carl Peters, who was a Fairport artist. He himself was a World War I veteran. He was chosen to be the artist for this beautiful mural, so we're really fortunate that this building has been so enmeshed with the veterans through the years, beginning at the very first. The Perinton Historical Society has been around since 1935, and many of the original 10 women that founded our organization themselves had husbands that served in various wars. So we're very pleased to welcome you to today. If you haven't had a chance to check out, we do have snacks on the other side. Please, after our presentations, take a look at our World War II exhibit in the entryway. Check out the snacks. Take a look around. We're so happy to have you here today. Our MC today is Mike Salini, who is a United States Air Force veteran, having served from 1995 to 2001, including a tour along the DMZ in South Korea. He's past president of the Perinton VFW Post 8495, and he was recently honored by being recognized as one of the top 50 All-American Post Commanders. He is currently a security officer at Fairport's Martha Brown Middle School. He is very dedicated to his work with veterans causes and always gives 110% to get the job done. He is also involved in the community with youth sports, coaching, baseball, and football. Please welcome Commander Mike Salini.
Thank you for that. It's truly an honor to be able to be here with you all today. Now, if you can, please rise as Marty Barsham is a senior at Fairport High School and a member of the school band and chorus, will be performing the national anthem. Maddie will be graduating in a few weeks, and she plans on continuing her studies in vocal performance at college. In her spare time, Maddie enjoys singing in local musicals and community events and performing with her a cappella group. Maddie?
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you for that wonderful performance, Manny. The first person I'd like to introduce right now is Perinton's town historian extraordinaire, Bill Porritt.
Thank you. The next speaker, someone says extraordinary, you just want to get out of the room as quickly as possible. It's great to be here. This is a celebration of our World War II veterans as they embark on this incredible journey. And so how exciting that we can play a little part of this and give them a great send-off. In addition to those veterans that will be making that big trip, we have some other folks here that also served. I want to start out with my friend Charlie Barranco here in the front row, served in the Navy in World War II. Bill Reese served with Marines in World War II. Where is my good friend Mary Massangelo, who also served in a different way. She was a Rosie the Riveter for 3 years at Chiron Optical here in this area, and did her part to support the war effort as well. Thank you all. And then I look around and I see neighbors like Mr. Tom Connors and the Connors family. Mr. Connors is going off. My former gym teacher, George Stites in Penfield, pretty fantastic. You know, it seems like a lifetime ago to me that he was my gym teacher, but it turns out it's only a little piece of your life. So pretty fantastic. Here in Fairport and Perinton, we're so fortunate that our World War II records were preserved on the fly, created during the war, and preserved for in the neighborhood of 700 soldiers. New York State put out an edict to communities all across the state back during the war that records should be created. We should capture what is happening here because of its epic proportion of importance. And that's what happened. So we have those records for over 700 that were related to our community. We still have those today. And so those can be shared with people, and we try our best because it's an important part of the record and what happened here. We're so proud of our veterans. Imagine that in this building, when this was the library, Vicki told you that this opened as the Fairport Public Library, that during the war, perhaps the younger brothers and sisters, parents, were writing their family members from the tables in this library. They were going to the newspapers and reading what was happening as best they could and gathering the news of their loved ones overseas. And all of that happened in this room, in this community, and across this country. And people at home were trying to support those soldiers as best they could. People working in the war plants, in the food production plants to do their part, to sacrifice. The victory gardens that were established everywhere. And so all over America, if you opened a Fairport High School yearbook in 1943, 44, and 45, a good percentage of the yearbook was really about supporting the war effort, with photos and information of the soldiers. In our newspapers, filled with information, letters home from those soldiers. And those all give us bits and pieces of our past and let us know the importance of the event. So we thank you so much for your service. We wish you an amazing, incredible, historic, emotional journey. And back home, we'll somehow be following along and be there with you. Thank you very much. doesn't even look at it.
Thank you, Bill. Next up, I'm honored to introduce our guest speaker today, Congressman Joe Morelli. Congressman Morelli represents the 25th Congressional District of New York, including all of Monroe County. He is a member of the House Appropriations Committee and serves as a ranking member of the House Committee on Administration. He has previously served as the House Armed Forces Committee. Throughout his time in Congress, he has worked diligently to support our veterans and service members by expanding health care, enhancing support services for those in crisis, ensuring our armed forces have the tools and the resources that they need. Thank you, Congressman Morelli, for your support of our veterans and for being here with us today.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks so much to everyone who organizes, Jean, her mom, Vicki. Thank you for your introductions, and Bill for that historical backdrop on why we gathered today. And this is really impressive. I've been in this room before a number of times. Never seen this many. I wouldn't have bet that this many people could have actually fit in this room. But I want to thank also Commander Cellini. That's how we would say it in the old neighborhood, for that kind introduction and for his leadership. This is really, really important. What an incredible day today. And I want to thank everyone at the Perinton Historical Society for hosting the event. As has been said, and we all know, next month marks the 80th anniversary of the Allied forces launching an historic invasion that changed the course of World War II. D-Day, as we're going to hear from my longtime friend Dave McDonald, who's going to give us a presentation on the history here. But it reminds us, and should always remind us, as a reminder of the immense cost of freedom and the profound debt we owe to those who fought and who fell for us, who gave, in Lincoln's words, the last full measure of devotion to their country. And today we have the honor of celebrating the extraordinary valor and service of 5 extraordinary individuals who answered the call of duty and are going to spend time next month on what I can only imagine will be an extraordinarily emotional trip to Normandy, France. And they'll carry with them the stories of heroism and resilience that is true of all of the men and women who have served, who have given in their courage and sacrifice unwavering determination to secure liberty against tyranny. I know you're going to hear more about each of them and what they did and what their experiences were, but their lives truly give meaning to the word patriot. What each of them did, each of them have extraordinary stories. Men who were really just teenagers, boys, in some respects, when they went off to fight on our behalf. And their lives and our lives were changed forever because of that sacrifice and that service. It's hard for me to imagine, I think it's probably hard for any of us, to imagine what it must have been like to be on the boats on D-Day, approaching the beach. I think they all knew, whether they were there or, I know my friend Al was in Okinawa. When you're about to engage in a battle where you know the odds are that several of the people who are with you and you yourself might not come back. You just know the statistics. You know that people won't come back. And yet somehow, in the midst of that, and what must be terrifying circumstances, you still go. And you still offer yourself up and you defend your family, the people back home, and you defend your country. It's really extraordinary. And think of what we owe to people who are willing to do it. I often say all of the rights guaranteed to us under our Constitution, the Bill of Rights, all the things we believe in as Americans, without regard to which side of the aisle on, whether you're on one side of the spectrum or the other, all of us believe in the freedoms and the values of America. But none of it would be worth anything unless there were men and women willing to stand in for us and to fight to guarantee those freedoms. It's really an extraordinary, extraordinary thing when you think about it. And yet they do it freely. And what I really found additionally inspiring about the biographies of the 5 men that we acknowledge today and honor today and send off today is that not only did they give service to their country in their military lives, but they all came home and contributed significantly to this community and to the country. So service is literally in their bloods, in their DNA, and that's what they continued to do as teachers, as Rotarians, even as politicians serving on the village board of trustees. But that shows their commitment to dedication and devotion to this country, and that's why we often refer to them as the greatest generation, because of what they did and what they have sacrificed. It's with great pride that we join them, I think, today to honor their service, but also to give them the send-off they deserve as they depart for D-Day. And I think you're also going to visit the National World War II Museum in New Orleans as part of the journey. I think as neighbors, we can't adequately express the depths of our gratitude to Joe, Al, Ziggy, Tom, and George, but we can do, and what we're doing here today in big numbers is be with them to express our gratitude and all that they have done. I think we can also, out of our inspiration for what they've done and for what this entire generation has done, is to strive a life that's worthy of their sacrifices. Ensure their stories live on in the hearts and minds of not only this generation, but generations to come. And never forget that sacrifice and that courage and that devotion to country. And we can continue to protect the freedoms they fought to defend, working to build a world where peace, justice, and democracy prevail. Churchill said, "Those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it." Wisdom we need to keep in mind every single day, particularly at this pivotal moment in world history, when we face new threats of tyranny around the world. And never forget, as we often say in Washington, we'll have our moments. Will they be Chamberlain moments, or they will be Churchill moments? Will we stand up to defend what we believe in and the values we believe in around the world? Or will we stand back and let others who have malign intent dictate the rules of engagement around the globe? I know this generation answered the call. Our generation needs to answer the call as well, and allow their sacrifices, and the veterans who continue to fight for our freedoms continue to make sure that that sacrifice lives on. And they didn't fight just so we could have democracy in our time. They fought to ensure democracy for all time. So I want to just express, I do have Commander certificates for each of the 5 that acknowledges their service, as well as flags that were flown over the United States Capitol. I hope you take them as a sign of our expression and gratitude for all the extraordinary service, and to make sure that you have an amazing, amazing trip, that you come back and tell us all about what you saw and your remembrances. So thank all of you for allowing the opportunity to be here. May God bless all of you in your travels, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you. I can't even get certificates out of a bag without help. Joseph? Thank you, sir. And Mike, you want to give him the flag? And Big Al? Thank you. Al is legendary. Ziggy? He's right there. Thank you, sir. God bless you. Tom? George. I know it's George. George, you know who you are. This is Tom's flag.
And there's one more.
Oh, there's no, I'm sorry. George, your flag. Oh, the United States Capitol. God bless all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Morelli. Next up, we will hear words from representatives of our sponsors here today. First up, from the Greatest Generations Foundation, Mary Ann Dupree. Most of you know Mary Ann as the daughter behind Harmonica Pete's wheelchair. One of the opportunities she had with her father was to be part of the Greatest Generations Foundation, and accompanied him on several occasions to events in the USA and Europe. Over the years, she has worked with the foundation to find World War II veterans interested in returning to European battlefields where they served. The foundation also sponsors Vietnam veterans travel to visit Vietnam. She is continuing her dad's work to support the community in her new role as the volunteer coordinator at St. Joseph's Neighborhood Center. Please welcome Mary Ann Dupre.
Hello, everyone. There's my brother waving in the back. I'm so thrilled to have so many of you here. When I first started thinking about this trip, I had no idea that it was the Queen Mary trip that the gentlemen were taking. And Jean called me one day and she said, can you come to breakfast and talk to a couple of these guys because they can't quite decide if they want to go or not. Partway through the breakfast, she said, well, is there anything about the ship? And I said, whoa, wait a minute, this is the Queen Mary trip? And she said, yeah, and I looked at them and I said, if you don't take this trip, you're crazy. So it really, the foundation itself is very different. We're all used to honor flight. Everybody has a guardian, everybody has somebody with them. The idea of the foundation is to take these gentlemen and ladies back to the battlefields and the areas that they fought and let them go by themselves and leave what ghosts or thoughts they need to leave there. Say goodbye to the guy in the dugout that didn't make it home, but he did. And be able to let go of that. And I know as the daughter of a World War II vet, especially the only daughter in a family of 5, that I was never going to see what my dad needed to let go of. And the idea of him letting go and not being my strong father and breaking down because he was standing in the Ardennes forest where his mother and father had served in World War I and where he lost many friends. He would never expose himself to his daughter. And that's the concept behind the foundation and why they don't go with anybody that they know. Every one of them has a Vietnam veteran that travels with them, a battle buddy that knows exactly what they're going through. And that's the biggest difference. And I'll tell you, and Mike can back me up on this, the first time when I was like, wait, you're taking my dad for 10 days to Luxembourg, Germany, and all these other places, and none of us can go? And every day I'm watching Facebook to see, like, is he okay? Is he doing all right? And other than, you know, anybody that knew my dad, he would talk until the cows came home. And so, you know, somebody put a post on there about him, dad being awake at 4 o'clock in the morning drinking bourbon. And I'm like, what are you doing to my dad? And she said, he won't go to sleep. And, but the experiences that my dad had and that we shared, and just the opportunities that this foundation gives, and the opportunity to these gentlemen and ladies, there was a Rosie group that went not too long ago, for them to be able to just be back there and be at peace a little bit. They visit the cemeteries. When I was there, we actually were blessed to go to the German cemetery. And we met some soldiers whose job was, they were German soldiers that were there to repair the German cemetery. And it was just fascinating. But this trip in particular is just unbelievable. You're traveling on the Queen Mary, and could you hand me that, John? Or John, Mike. So this is something my dad had, and you can see it after, but this is the Queen Elizabeth. I don't know how many of you may have traveled home on the Queen Elizabeth. There were thousands and thousands of you guys crammed onto the top of that ship. And that's what this depicts, and there's a guy playing a harmonica here, which is exactly what my dad did on the ship. He entertained back there as well. You're going to be in the most beautiful ship on the planet, pretty much, enjoying these amazing meals. This is something that they did with my father. So one night, every night, the gentleman will present about the war. There'll be a person there talking about it, and this is what's behind them to explain who they are and what they did. And it's so hard to describe the opportunities that you're going to have. And for anyone else out there, whether you're Vietnam or World War II, let me know, because I would love to hook you up with them. There's trips still going for veterans that are capable of travel. And it's an amazing organization, and I'd love to talk to anybody else about it any more you'd like.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Our next speaker is representing the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, Al DiCarlo. Al is very familiar with the National World War II Museum. He has visited several times acting as a guardian to veteran Robert L. Perschetti. A retired educator, his career spanning 25 years teaching high school, history, and government classes. Please welcome Al DiCarlo.
I thought you took it.
No, here it is. There it is.
Thank you for having me. It's really nice to be in this old library with someone, without someone yelling at me to be quiet or shush everyone. What started out as the D-Day Museum expanded to include all of World War II down in New Orleans. First question I asked when I was there for the first time was, why is this in New Orleans? Very quickly, the business, the factories of Andrew Higgins is where he was from, and that made sense. He, of course, produced the landing craft that, according to, at the time, General Eisenhower said was the man who won the war for us due to those little ships. The Higgins boats are immortalized there, as is Andrew Higgins, and that's why you should leave this today and immediately plan your trip to New Orleans if you have not been there. It's spectacular. It's the greatest museum. They support all things related to the war, an appreciation for what our men and women did to a very grateful nation. Veterans and now high school students are sponsored by the museum to visit and learn more about our greatest generation. Mr. Perschetti and I were guests 5 years ago when we went to the Pacific, and I'll talk about Iwo Jima when I introduce him later. And we will be guests at the end of this month. 3 weeks from today we're leaving. We're going to be going to Germany, then we'll go through the Netherlands, we're going to end up in Dunkirk, and then to Normandy before heading back over to Dover, Great Britain, and then we'll fly back home. So it's a trip that he and I are both really excited to be a part of. And as complimentary guests of the World War II Museum, we are very, very grateful to them. And like I said, please find your way there sooner than later. It is just a fabulous place. So thank you.
Next up, we will get to learn about our guests of honor here today with us and their presenters. Our first presenter is Jerry Butterbrot. Jerome Butterbrot, Master Sergeant, United States Air Force, retired, served from July 1975 to September 1995. His father served in the United States Navy during World War II, and two of his brothers served in the Air Force and the Marines during Vietnam. While on assignment in England, Jerry met his wife and together raised 3 children there. After the service, Jerry worked for Kodak, Government and AMP, Commercial Systems, ITT, Excelis, and then L3 Harris as a field technician, moving on to program manager on an Air Force contract through Robins Air Force Base, Georgia, until April of 2017, when he retired for the second time. Since retiring, he has been an active volunteer for Honor Flight Rochester. Jerry accompanied Joseph Grossman on the Soaring Valor flight in November of 2022 and has remained friends with Joe ever since. There's a lot of laughs when they're together. Please welcome Jerry Butterbrot.
You got a handkerchief?
First of all, you might be wondering why an Air Force guy would be talking about a Navy guy. I was wondering too, but before I go to that, Before I go to there, I talked to Joe and I said, I'm gonna be speaking about you. And he goes in typical Joe fashion, shh, loose lips sink ships. So with that said, I'll keep this short, maybe. I did have the privilege of going with Joe down in New Orleans in November 2022. It was Veterans Day weekend as well. And boy, did we have a lot of fun. Joe doesn't sleep much, but he is quite a character. He loves telling jokes. And oh, by the way, if he gives you a mint, it's one of those 500 rules of life. Take it. You don't know why. Lifesavers. So Soaring Valor brings the World War II veterans down and their guardians to New Orleans for the National World War II Museum, which you just heard about. And I can't tell you how thrilled I was to have that opportunity. I got called pretty much at the last minute to fill in and take Joe down there. And I found a new friend for life. Joe, it's been an honor. Now let me talk a little bit about Joe. Joe was born in 1927. If you do the math, that makes it 17 when he entered. His father was self-employed in the trucking business during the Great Depression. Both of his parents were European immigrants. His family all got along with one another and they went to school together and enjoyed the neighborhood. Joe only heard about the war and the hostilities going over in Asia and Europe via the radio. There was no TV back then. When he heard about the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, he felt everyone was in a tizzy and that no one knew what the future would be. His family became very concerned about what was going on in the war. Joe enlisted in the Navy in June of 1944 because he liked the water. He was sent to basic training in Sampson Naval Station in New York. You traveled far, didn't you? After his basic training, he was then sent to gunnery training in California. He was assigned to serve as a gunner aboard a merchant ship with the Naval Armed Guard. He boarded a cargo ship and sailed in the convoy across the Atlantic to North Africa. And apparently there was only 12 of you and a crew chief on that boat. Much of his time overseas was the gray area, as he describes it. He was not allowed to go to shore except for Antwerp, Belgium. When he was in Belgium and visiting Antwerp, there was buzz bombs falling as he was in the city, so somehow he made it. Joe had brothers that served in the Army Air Corps during World War II who was shot down over Romania and was a POW during the war, for the rest of the war. His other brother served in the military stateside. He did have a brother-in-law in the Army and was killed at the Battle of the Bulge. The Battle of the Bulge was 16 December 1944 to 25 January 1945. Joe returned to the States before the end of the war and was reassigned to destroyer escort USS Abercrombie. He wears the hat quite proudly too. The DE 343 is the designation. On the West Coast as a gunner in preparation for the possible Japanese invasion, which thankfully never happened. Not long after he was on board, the war ended. He was discharged as Seaman First Class in June of 1946 from the Great Lakes Naval Training Station in Illinois. Ask Joe why he served, and he'll tell you, because everyone was serving and he felt he needed to do his part. He had no regrets about joining the Navy, and he'll tell you one of his most memorable experiences of World War II is that he survived. I always have a way of saying to any veteran who says they're not worthy, each and every single one of you signed a blank check to the United States government. Those of us that have served are the lucky ones. We made it home. After that, he returned to Syracuse. His wife didn't like to be in Syracuse, apparently. She said she wanted to move to Rochester, so they moved to Rochester and raised their family, where he still lives. And he just recently celebrated his 97th birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
The next veteran that we will learn about is Robert Al Perschetti. Al DiCarlo will be introducing him. Al, again, is a retired Pittsford Mendon history teacher. A little over 10 years ago, Al's class was asked to write letters to veterans headed to Washington, D.C. with Honor Flight Rochester. Mr. Perschetti's name was on that list. When he returned from D.C., he came to Pittsford Mendon to find Al and the students who had wrote him to personally thank them for the letters. It was that day they became fast friends, and every year until Al retired, Mr. Perschetti continued to visit students and speak about the Great Depression and World War II. Al and Mr. Perschetti have traveled together far and wide, from Washington, D.C. to New Orleans to Iwo Jima. They both look forward to the 80th anniversary of D-Day in Normandy and are very excited to share this adventure together. Please welcome Al DiCarlo.
So this is my very good friend, Mr. Bob or Al Perschetti. He was a radio man, second class, serving with the U.S. Navy in the original Radio Shack, a communications ship called the USS El Dorado. He served toward the end of World War II in the Pacific Theater, traveled to Pearl Harbor after December 7th, couldn't get into the harbor because of the ships that were sunk, so they took a smaller boat in for the ferry in. Went to Guam, where he ran into, no cell phones, his brother, who was also there. All right, great story, let him tell you about that. And then eventually Iwo Jima, where he watched our Marines raise the U.S. flag both times. Okay, watched it. Had a picture of it too, because Joe Rosenthal, the photographer, was on the ship.
Wow.
He gave it to someone, and they never returned it. But that's okay, he's let it go. I haven't, but he has. And then he ended up near Okinawa toward the end, and was discharged and came back home. Pre-war, he served in the CCC camps out in Idaho. You see why I invited him into my classroom? He took care of like 50 years of history. I could call in sick because he took care of everything. And then he enlisted in the Navy after the Civilian Conservation Corps. He and I returned to Iwo Jima 74 years later for him on a trip sponsored by the good old World War II Museum. All right, and he's a legend with the World War II Museum because we've been there so many times. They just love him there. He is the son of Italian immigrants. He moved to East Rochester after the war, and he's still very active in the American Legion, the VFW, Honor Flight Rochester, and still speaks in schools locally throughout the area. He and I are very excited to travel to Normandy to celebrate the 80th anniversary of the Normandy landing, not invasion, because the French say you do not invade your friends. It was the Normandy landing, where he's going to honor his servicemen and women and fellow paisans who were in the European theater, not just the Pacific. Mr. Perschetti is still an avid gardener. He's a follower of golf. He's 102 years old. With all these 90-year-old veterans here, my wife was really happy that I was making younger friends. There are two types of people in this world. There are givers and there are takers. And today we honor one of the great givers that I know. Thanks.
Our next veteran is Siegfried Ziggy Weinthal, who will be introduced by Joe Charles. Joe is a retired Xerox engineer and a 12-year volunteer with Honor Flight Rochester. He supports Honor Flight veterans in various capacities, such as accompanying veterans on their trip to Washington and event photographer. You'll find Joe at the Rochester Airport at 3 a.m. Saturday mornings on an Honor Flight departure, and right back at the airport on Sundays to welcome the veterans home. For many years, he has driven veterans in his really cool 68 Shelby Mustang convertible in Memorial Day parades in East Rochester and Fairport. He is also a member of the Patriot Guard Riders of New York. Joe first met Ziggy when he was asked to accompany him on a Soaring Valor trip to the National World War II Museum in New Orleans back in 2022. Since then, they become good friends. Joe says he is honored to serve all veterans and help in any way he can. Please welcome Joe Charles.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm indeed Joe Charles, and I've become very good friends with Ziggy in the 2 years I've known him. Had a very great time, as Jerry told you, down at the World War II Museum. I went on that same trip. First, a little background on Ziggy, as his route to the military is very different and very unique. Siegfried Weinthal was born in February 1929 in Essen, Germany, a small town in northern Germany. His childhood did not last long. As a young boy, he and his brother were forced to leave school. The German children threw stones at them because they were Jewish. Jewish-owned businesses and the town synagogue were destroyed. In 1939, Ziggy would have been almost 10 years old. His father was sent to Sachsenhausen-Oranienburg concentration camp. It was primarily a political prisoner camp, but he was later released when Hermann Goering passed a resolution allowing some World War I veterans, of which Ziggy's father was, Louis, to be freed. Louis was one of the last ones to get out of that concentration camp under that program. At the same time, in 1940, Louis Weinthal's family received sponsorship from relatives in the United States and managed to flee Germany. When he was 11 years old, Ziggy and his family boarded a train to Italy, where they then boarded an American ocean liner, the SS Washington, and made their way to New York City. His family was grateful to have the opportunity to flee Germany because so many friends and relatives of his did not. In school in America, Ziggy never experienced any anti-German or anti-Jewish sentiment directed at him. The hardest part was learning to speak English. After a year living in New York City, Ziggy's father moved to Hartford, Connecticut, where he found work as a butcher and eventually opened his own market. Ziggy was working as a bellhop in a hotel when he found out about the attack on Pearl Harbor. He was shocked by the attacks. Ziggy had no relatives that were in the military, as they were older than military age. He followed the war by listening to the radio, like everyone, reading the newspaper, and listening to what other people were saying about it. Ziggy is 95 years old. So he would have been 11, 12, 13, as the war was going on. His father was a quiet person, didn't talk much about his thoughts about the war or how it impacted him as a World War I veteran, German World War I veteran. Ziggy was too young to aid in any significant way for the war efforts. To make some money, he had a shoe shining business. He would also pick tobacco at farms outside of Hartford and set up pins at the local bowling alley. And I told Ziggy that's why I found 4 bowling balls in his house when we moved down. For VE Day, Ziggy was home and still struggling with English. A big celebration broke out in Hartford, and everyone was happy that finally rationing could be ending. Let's forward a year to April 1946. and a 17-year-old Ziggy arrived at Fort Eustis, Virginia. Much to the chagrin of his mother, who had relented and signed the papers for Ziggy to join the Army. Following basic training at Fort Eustis, he was sent to Wyoming for technical training in becoming a brakeman on a railroad. Needless to say, he was never a brakeman, as the Army sent him to Marburg, Germany, guarding American prisoners as part of the occupation forces. After 30 days, he was sent to Steyr, Austria, as part of the USFA, that's United States Forces Austria, to perform border patrol and to keep an eye on the Russians. He was then sent to Linz, Austria for the remainder of his tour, where amongst other things, he drove a 2.5-ton truck. And I'll tell you why that's important in a minute. During a hospitalized injury playing baseball, the chaplain found out he spoke fluent German, go figure, and asked him to assist with a program involving Austrian youth activities. And that was to reprogram youth away from the Hitler youth mentality to the American way of life. He even recruited an Austrian boxer to teach the kids to box. He eventually transferred to the constabulary, which is the police force, as a clerk in the recruiting office. His job was to entice GIs to re-enlist. It was at this time that his 3-year enlistment was up, and he re-enlisted for another year, working as an MP before being sent home. So, you're thinking that's the end of it, huh? Well, you'd think that'd be the end of the story, but not so fast. When Ziggy came home, he went to work as a car hauler out of Buffalo. He did this until October 1958, when he re-enlisted, but this time in the Navy. He was sent to Brooklyn, then Bayonne, New Jersey, in the supply department for 1 year. He was then transferred to the Samuel B. Roberts DD-823 destroyer for the remainder of his service, where he ran the ship store. That was the end of his service. Following this, his service in the military, Ziggy drove semis all over the Northeast and Midwest for over 40 years. If you're counting, he was 86 when he was forced to retire in 2012. And that is my great friend, Ziggy Weinkel.
Our next veteran is Tom Connors. Nick Verzella will be introducing Tom. Nick is a lifelong resident and fixture in the village of East Rochester, New York. Nick graduated high school in 1944 and shortly after was drafted into the U.S. Army. Assigned to the 78th Infantry in Europe in the spring of '45, he spent much time guarding German POWs in camps near Berlin during the occupation. His tour of duty in Germany ended as the Cold War was beginning with Russian intervention and the Berlin airlift. After the war, Nick had a long career as a teacher, coach, principal, and past commander of American Legion Post 1917 in his hometown of East Rochester. This small village lost 34 soldiers in World War II, 5 from his graduating class. Nick then vowed to the Gold Star families their sons would never be forgotten as long as he lived. For more than 40 years, Nick was involved in organizing and speaking at Memorial Day and Veterans Day remembrances, and in 2011 was inducted into the New York State Senate Veterans Hall of Fame. Please welcome Nick Verzella.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Mary Ann's going to help me because I forgot my glasses at home. I'm going to have a tough time reading this. But first, I'd like Tommy Connors to come up here, please. Tommy. And take a seat right here. Thank you. All right. Now I'd like Gene Kelly to come up too, please. We're gonna wait. I need you, Gene.
You can sit on my knee.
You want a pair of glasses?
Okay. Tommy, would you stand up, please? Okay, Gene, about a week or so ago, you emailed me and asked if I have a profile of Tom Connors. And my first thought was, why did she call me? Why doesn't she do it? Or even Mary? What's the big deal? I've been in our Legion quite a while. Anyway, no one says no to Gene. Of course, I'll do it. So, Tom, would you face Dr. Foote?
I saw him come in, hi Charlie.
Okay, would you face him? All right, now would you face Mary, Jeannie's mother?
Well, I talked to her earlier
Okay.
today, of course.
Was it tough to profile Tom Connors? Okay, you may go. I was gonna ask, how much do you weigh? How tall are you? But you don't need that information, do you, Jeannie? Okay. I told you I forgot my glasses without, and about 10 people in the audience offered to give me their glasses, but none of them worked, so we'll do the best we can, Mary, okay? Okay. Unless they are new to the village of East Rochester, everyone there knows Thomas Argyle Connors. And those who are his friends affectionately call him TC. Tom, a pillar of the village of East Rochester, was born in his beloved village, and was raised, educated, and even worked there as a popular teacher and a valued mentor. His community service is legendary in East Rochester. Alongside teaching in the junior high school for over 3 decades, the energetic Tom joined the East Rochester Volunteer Fire Department in the 1950s. Soon after that experience, he decided to enter politics and served several terms as a trustee on the village board. Obviously, Tom wasn't busy enough, so he also took on as village historian for a while, until his wife Mary took over and served in that position with excellence for more than just a few years. Incidentally, while all these family experiences were happening, and his lovely and talented wife managed to have 7 wonderful, energetic, well-mannered, respectful children. For sure, the apple didn't fall far from the tree in the Connors family. And as the wise old adage advises, if you want something done really well, be sure to ask a busy person. So, predictably, in 1976, while planning for one of East Rochester's grandest and largest events ever, the celebration of the nation's bicentennial, Tom and Mary were chosen to co-lead that once-in-a-lifetime experience. East Rochester's parade of events in honor of our nation's 200th birthday was indeed a genuine, never-to-be-forgotten celebration, and Tom and Mary Connors were highly recognized for their gigantic efforts. How Tom Connors manages his time is a mystery, for even now, he still continues to be a regular and active member of community organizations. The American Legion, the Rotary, East Rochester Retired Teachers Association, St. Jerome's Church. And up to 2 or 3 years ago, he spent more than just a wee bit of time on golf courses near and far. He also liked to quaff an ale or two at Prince George's Tavern on Main Street in East Rochester. Thomas Argyle Connors is quite a guy. On December 7th, 1941, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, Tom was a high school sophomore and had just turned 15 a couple of months before. 3 years later, after graduation in 1944, Tom signed for the military draft on his 18th birthday. During World War II, after induction and basic training, draftees were usually sent to either the East Coast to board ships and cross the Atlantic on a 9 to 10 day trip to war in Europe. Or draftees would be sent to the West Coast to board ships for a long 1 month trip across the ocean to war in the Pacific. Tom was sent to the Pacific, and after a 30-day journey, the convoy arrived at Okinawa. The fierce battle for Okinawa had ended on June 11th, 1945. And it was a vital victory for the United States because it was now a shorter distance to the Japanese mainland and allowed our ships to drop troops, our planes to bomb, and our soldiers to invade that mainland and end the war. Tom was with the American troops assembled at Okinawa, getting ready for the expected invasion, when suddenly the world was totally shocked as the United States dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki on August 6th and 9th to end the war. This action may have saved the life or limbs of Tom Connors, for the United States military had estimated up to 1 million or more U.S. troops would have been killed and hundreds of thousands would have been wounded had the invasion succeeded or occurred. Like most veterans who come home after discharge, they seldom talk about their experiences, and although I have known Tom Connors for close to 93 years, since kindergarten, I had never heard him talk about how the deadly atomic bomb may have actually saved his life. Ladies and gentlemen, one of East Rochester's most treasured residents, Tom Connors. Thank you, man.
Thank you, John.
I'm holding things up.
No worries.
Thank you.
Scott Thon will be introducing our next veteran, George Stites. Scott is a Penfield High School graduate with a career in the high-tech industry spanning 35 years and is actively involved in Little League baseball programs in Victor and Farmington. In high school, he played multiple sports and was baseball coach George Stite's catcher for 3 successful seasons. George will always be coach to Scott. Last year, they were invited to attend the grand opening of the Liberation exhibit at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, and will be in attendance again on June 6th for the 80th anniversary D-Day tribute for all those who served and sacrificed on the beaches of Normandy and beyond. Scott feels honored to perform his duties as coach's guardian for this event in New Orleans. Scott and his wife Terry treasure the friendship with their dear friend, Coach Stites. Scott?
Scott, you were the quarterback at Wonderful. You had a brother too.
I did.
Hi, George. I want to say something here, if I can, just for a second, okay? I used to be the football announcer for football games at East Rochester for, I don't know, 20 years. And one day, East Rochester played Penfield. Scott, I was the announcer. Scott performed that day on one of the greatest games that I had ever seen a performer do his duty. And that was it. At the end of the day, I just went home and so forth. Well, short time later, I got a nice letter, and it said thanking me for giving him such a great, I don't know, recommendation that day or whatever. But that was a great, great day, Scott. Other than that day, but it was unforgettable. You're great, kid. George, you got more victories over there than you have years by far. Are you still? You're not. Umpires are always right.
Ladies and gentlemen, the incomparable and our national treasure from Penfield, originally from Beacon, New York, George T. Stites.
I've got to apologize because I thought I was speaking to a bunch of Army vets. And I turned around and we've got all these beautiful ladies out here and a couple of men and my GI friends that we went to Louisiana together. So I'm really dumbfounded, so my speech is a little off the cuff, as usual. And if you can't hear me in the back, raise your hand.
What?
Because I know what happens when you get back.
We can hear you.
Is that any better? Maybe I should let you go back to sleep. Anyhow, I'm here, and I'm going to say a few words that I might hurt some of you people, because I'm going to tell it like one of our generals told us in Louisiana, George, tell it like it is. So I don't mean to offend anybody, but I'm going to go back to some of the vernacular we used during the war. First of all, before I forget, I used to throw this out, and I was lucky enough to go to Alger Carling's class and taught at Mendon had a couple of classes with him. And one of the questions I used to ask the kids, how many people do you think were on the ship when I went over from New York to Scotland? I'm going to give you just a couple seconds to think about how many people were on the ship. I'm not going to poll you, it takes you long. There were only 22,000 of us. 22,000 people on one ship with the Queen Elizabeth. We ate twice a day, we slept once a day, and the rest of the time was your time. We went over 3.5 days. When I came home, it took 19 days. So you care about getting us home. My speech was dedicated on the premise that I was talking to the vets, as I said. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pay homage to the people who made it possible for us to go to things like the honor flight in Louisiana. And the person who did the most and is the unsung hero is Gene Kelly. Gene, where are you? We went to Fairport at a breakfast, and we were about 14 or 17 of us, and Scotty was with me. We sat down and had breakfast, and Gene was outlining what we were going to do, and meanwhile, she got to talk to Scotty, and the first thing you know, she said, "Gee, this guy's got a little charisma, and he knows what he's doing." So she put Scotty in charge of us when we went to Louisiana. First we went to New York, Buffalo to New York, and then Louisiana. But behind the scenes, again, we would not have been there if it wasn't for Gene. So Gene, we owe you so much with all your start of everything. And again, we have meetings at a restaurant in Henrietta. And I want to thank her. And she was smart enough that she realized that Scotty was the man she wanted to be the second lieutenant. So Scotty was in charge of all the vets when we were in Louisiana. When we left here, we went to St. John Fisher. When we got to St. John Fisher, there were 20 motorcycles waiting for us. 6 policemen. And they were our escort to Buffalo, because we flew out of Buffalo. And as we went down the highway, our policemen would roar out in front on their motorcycles and shut down all the highways, and we had clear sailing from here to Buffalo. If we went from here to the next town, shut it down. Right on this road, people go say, "Who was it? Was that the president?" Just a couple of GIs on our way, having a good time. When we got to Louisiana, we were greeted by 2 students from Wausau, Long Island. And they were to accompany us and ask us any questions about World War II. And we had a General Prescott, and he said, "Gentlemen, tell it like it is. Don't hold anything back." And we did. So we had, Scotty and I was in charge of all his group, and we had a young lady by the name of Leah and a gentleman by the name of Joe from Wausau, Long Island, and they had to have a contest to enter to see if they could make this trip. And once they did, they were in charge of us. And they would wheel us, I was in a wheelchair, and they would wheel us to and fro, and they were just great, great, great kids. They did everything possible. When we got home, A week later, we get a telephone call from Leah, and we get a call from Joe. We still hear from them every week. That's great friends we have. Now Leah, we said, Leah, what year are you in? She said, I'm a senior. We said, what are you going to do with your? She said, I'm going to school. I said, where? We said, where? She said, RIT. We said, where? RIT. I said, wow. I said, I refereed probably a couple of hundred games there. And I said, you know, when you go to RIT, Scotty and I are going to take you out for dinner. And she said, no, get out of here. Well, we waited till she got there. About a month later, we called her up. We said, it's Scotty and Coach, and we're going to take you out to dinner. She said, can I bring my roommate? I said, sure. They were both soccer players at RIT. And the kids were so great, and we had such a great time. And everybody there was so great. They go down their way to make sure we were taken care of. And we had such a great trip and great fun. Now, I want to tell you how great the Army is.
You want to sit in there?
The military will get a kick out of this. I had an older brother, Charlie, and he was born during the Depression. And so he had to quit school and go to work. And his best pal, who happened to end up as my brother-in-law, also had to go to work. So they never went to high school. My brother Ed, who we call Professor, because in high school, he was so damn smart, captain of all the sports, had to take the IQ test over because he scored so high. And he graduated from Cornell back in cum laude. And so off they went to the war. Now when the war ended, my brother Charlie and Lou, who had never finished high school, both came home as staff sergeants. I, who graduated high school, came home as a corporal. My brother Ed, who graduated back cum laude from Cornell, came home a private. That's the Army. One of the things that happened to me, and it was a little weird, is we were throwing, no. A lot of people say, you were D-Day. I said, yeah. They said, what wave were you in? We said, we weren't worried about any wave. We were too busy praying. We were praying. We were scared. I said, I was 19 years old when I hit the beach. And I said, we never saw live stuff coming at us. Before, when you were training, they would lock in a 50 caliber machine gun and it would shoot over their head. But the Germans didn't lock anything in. The only thing that they locked in was the Americans. And that was us. And so when we got to D-Day, we had to climb down a Liberty ship. Now a Liberty ship is a piece of metal that they were putting together like in 9 days. And we had to climb down that. We went across with 3 boats, 3 of us, from Land's End. And when we were down in the hole, all of a sudden we heard this big noise. And boom, we run up to see what happened. The boat that was in between us was blown right up and gone. So all those people went right down. If you lived, you had 15 minutes before you succumbed because the water was so cold.
Okay.
Well, when we got to the Liberty ship and you went down, a cargo net. It was 90 feet high. Now, from there you go into what's called an LCI, Landing Craft Infantry. The LCI is manned by an ensign from the Navy and another midshipman. But they're going to take us into where the water is knee deep. He said, okay. So we get down, climb in the LCI, and now we start in to the beach. And this is where it could hurt some people. The crowds are throwing everything at us, and we're throwing it right back at them. 30 caliber, 50 calibers, 30-inch guns. We're throwing in 30-inch guns. And the people said, what were you doing? We were praying. We were praying. At 19 years old, I was one scared boy. And so was everybody else. Because now this is for real. So when we get down on the cargo ship and get in the LCI and start in, and we know we're going to get off in knee-deep water. We get in the LCIs and we get up and they say, okay, drop the front. So they dropped the front, they said, okay, go. Nobody moves. The ensign yells, go! Nobody moves. It's not like John Wayne. Let's go get him. No way. So finally, he says, got to 50. He pulls back on a 50 caliber machine gun. He said, give him 30 seconds. He said, don't start moving, shoot from front, shoot from the back to the front. I'm in the back, you know what I'm doing. The little push there. Well, our first step to the knee was, they didn't know where the knee was. The knee was here. People say, what wave were you in? We were waves. We were praying. We were scared. And now, all of a sudden, we hear voices yell, get those damn rifles up over your head. We can always get new people, new men, but we can't get new rifles. They just say that in the John Wayne movies. War is hell. You have to be in a war to know what war is like. These gentlemen know. If you read about it in books, you can see Private Ryan. That's not war. You don't know what went on up there unless you were there. And you don't want to be there. I was lucky enough to be on David Muir's program. I found a box of letters that I had written to my sister. She saved them. When she passed away, she gave them to her daughter. The daughter put them in the attic, and they sat in the attic, and one day they cleaned the attic, and they said, what are the letters? He said, I don't know. They were all letters I sent home. One was written on D-Day. Well, you got to be careful what you write, because everything is sensitive. Because otherwise, the Germans would know where you were, and so forth. But anyhow, I was on David Muir's program, and I got over 1,000 calls from people I had never heard of in my life. And they said you did a great job. Well, I did a great job because I blistered the Republican Party, and I blistered the Democratic Party. And I said, why the hell are they always fighting each other? Why don't we get along together and work as a team instead of adversaries? Well, all these people from Georgia, Minnesota, California, Missouri, they agreed. We're still at the same place. We haven't accomplished anything. it's just, it's amazing. I don't know where we're going. We just can't get lower. All right, I'm going to close it up here a little bit. It was August the 6th, and the war was ending. We knew it. The Germans were ready to capitulate after chasing the Germans. And we were throwing a softball around on a grassy plain. And all of a sudden, the plane flies over, nobody looks up because we know it's ours. The plane flies over, nobody looks up. The plane flies over, so I said, holy mackerel, it's a crowd. And we looked up, sure enough, here's the German plane. He circles again, down comes his landing wheel. He said, he's going to land. So like an idiot, I run in and grab in my pump tent, I grabbed my Beretta. The Beretta is a pistol. So I grabbed the Beretta, run across the highway. The German taxis from here down the end of the field, and he gets out and he starts to run. So he's running and I'm running. I'm running after him. And I look back, I'm the only fool out there. He runs and runs and he runs, and there's a ditch. He jumps in the ditch. The ditch is about 30 feet high, 20 feet high. So I yell, hands up! Hands up! Everybody's hands up. He's looking at me, I'm pointing my Beretta. He's pointing his pistol at me. 3 times I yell, 3 times he's looking at me and I'm looking at him. And we probably both went in our pants. Finally, he puts his gun down, and he puts it down. I bring him up, and start walking across the field, and now my help comes. And they said, George, take a look at your pistol. I said, what do you mean? Take a look. Pistol is jammed. If the German ever shot, I wouldn't be talking to you today. That's how lucky I was. I got to be lucky enough to let you people go, and I thank you for your time and your effort. And Godspeed, and God bless you all. Yeah, I think my brother Scotty. I don't know where to go without Scotty. Thank you.
Is it the guy who always come down the store? In their blue jackets? No? Is this that tall guy who came down? Was this the one
Let's give all of our veterans and their presenters a round of applause.
You think Jimmy's here? Or he's not? You think Jimmy's here? You see Jimmy?
Next up, we will have a D-Day presentation by Dave McDonald. Dave is also a graduate of Penfield High School. He is a certified public accountant by day, amateur military historian by night, and a 15-year member of the American Battlefield Trust. Please welcome Dave McDonald.
Hello, everybody. So, D-Day, it's not just a day. It is history. It's when the world changed in many ways. Just to kind of brief everybody a little bit, kind of what's this all about. I mean, obviously we know the people who were there, but there's a lot of history. Yes, go ahead.
They can't hear you over there.
Okay.
Just hold that.
Got it, roger that. Let's go back. This is history, right? September 1st, 1939, Germany invades Poland. The world changes. Germany takes over Europe pretty quickly, goes into Africa, takes on Russia, and it's a real big war. When we get to 1944, we have things that are going to happen. Operation Torch, invade Africa. Now, think about it. Germany dominated Europe. They had defenses. They had a lot of technology, a lot of men, a lot of equipment. How do you get on to and beat them in this war? How do we do it? The British had tried, I think they put some Canadians up to it, to do an invasion. It didn't work. The Canadians died or went to prison camps. So now the Americans are up, and it's like, okay, from Norfolk, Virginia, actually, they planned Operation Torch all the way across the Atlantic to invade Africa. And the Americans with the British took on the Germans in Africa and the French, and they won in Africa. Then they said, Operation Husky, we're going to invade Sicily. Didn't go very well. Yes, we won in Sicily, but we lost a lot of men. A lot of men. A lot of British, a lot of Americans. It was a bloodbath. I've been there. It's sad. Well, where we go now? Churchill, he had an idea after meeting Stalin in Malta. We should invade in Greece, go right up the south of Europe, cut the Russians off from taking Germany. We wouldn't take Germany first. Americans liked the idea of crossing the channel. It made a lot more sense, and that's what the plan would be. But where? So Germany is lost in Africa. They're losing and retreating from Russia. The Allies have taken Italy, or they're in Italy, and the Allies are bombing Germany day and night. This is a real big war. So here's where we go. We're going to cross the English Channel. It is not a river, ladies and gentlemen. It is like an ocean. Over here at Calais, it's about 30 miles wide. That's where Hitler thought the invasion would take place. The shortest distance from England into France. The Americans favored down here under the beaches of the Normandy province and to cut into France and open up the port of Cherbourg. And, down here we have, this is up here at Brest, a major port that the Germans used in their navy. So if we get into Normandy, you can see where Paris is. It's not that far away, but this is not going to be easy. And as you'll see, we have a lot to deal with. The German defenses have gun placements all along the border. Concrete bunkers, barbed wire, pillboxes. They flooded the fields behind Normandy, so parachuters and gliders couldn't land there. So they tried to isolate certain of the beaches that tried to stop them from being invaded. Concrete teeth, if you know what those are, they're concrete placements on the beaches, on the roads that tanks can't go through. They have to go around. Germans had approximately 850,000 troops in France, only 80,000 in Normandy. But this is a formidable defense. This is not something to take lightly. It's not ever been attacked. And, well, it has been. Norman from England had attacked France back in the, I think, 1500s. At the same place, by the way. Very interesting. So here come the Allies' forces, 185,000 soldiers from 8 countries. Amazing, 8 countries. 20,000 vehicles, 4,200 landing ships, 1,200 merchant ships full of supplies. I like this part. 7 battleships. Now, we don't hear about battleships today. They've been supplanted by aircraft carriers. But in the day, these were the monsters of the sea. There was no better, bigger ship than a battleship. And wherever they went, the land would shake when they started firing. I heard once that, I think it was the USS Iowa, when they fired a 14-inch shell, it was like the weight of a Volkswagen Beetle flying 14 miles. If it hit a building, the building disappeared. If it hit an armored tank, it blasted into pieces and would roll over. These guns, 7 battleships. We got 23 cruisers, 65 destroyers, tugboats, ferries pulling docks, and the best part, the 20,000 paratroopers and 1,087 planes. You think of that, 1,087 planes taking off from England. All airports in England are flooded with these planes. They're coming in and they're going to land behind the beaches, control the bridges, isolate the Germans, and then let the beaches come in from the wave of Navy and Army. Of course, the Navy is going to bombard the coastline, and you'll see some of that here. It is Operation Overlord. It is the greatest invasion of a coastline in the history of the world. I believe in history, well, it's interesting, the largest attack by a fleet prior to this was the English in 1776 attacking us. So, I mean, when they came to us, the English was the largest navy in the world, and they came at us full blown, and George Washington had his hands full with that one. Well, the Germans are going to have their hands full here, because this is the largest invasion. And you can see 185,000 soldiers against really only 80 in Normandy. But those 80 are dug in deep. There's the coast of the English Channel. I've been there, this was a shot I took. It is beautiful. But you notice the cliffs. These are not beaches. This is a beautiful water. And, oops. This is Omaha Beach, more like where the Omaha soldiers came on. The debate was, where do you attack and how do you attack? Some theory said, go in at low tide, you can see more beach. Others said, go in at high tide, you get closer to the beach. You get closer to the side. So I think they went in and they were going to do it, I think, on the 5th. And because of weather, they had to postpone it until the 6th. Is that true? And it got postponed. This is out from a bunker inside of the Normandy Wall. This has actually taken on Point du Hoc. These bunkers that were here, built up by the Germans, most of them 6 feet of concrete and steel. 6 feet. They took direct hits from naval guns, and the bullets would bounce off the shells and just blow up. We bombarded the coast of France with about everything. And by the way, Hitler still thought they're coming to Calais. It's a short distance, of course. So let's put more of our troops up there. Here we are, Operation Overlord. 5 beaches. Sword Beach, the British 3rd Infantry and 6th Airborne. Gold Beach, also British 50th Inventory. Juneau, our Canadian friends, yes, our Canadian friends were there in force. Utah Beach, the 4th Infantry, and of course Omaha with the 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions. 5 beaches, all spread out on the Normandy coast. Very interesting point. I always like this one. Point du Hoc. I'll show it to you. It is a high cliff right between Utah and Omaha. The guns that would be up on that cliff could hit the landing crafts of either beach. They could shoot 12 miles out into the English Channel. The English Channel at that point is only 100 miles out. So it's deep water. And the ships could get in, and you don't want your landing craft, as the veterans were explaining, to have to go too far in the water. So they're going to have to be released out there in the ocean, and they're going to have to come in under heavy fire. The Navy can only do so much. Today, we all know the Air Force would have cleared the whole thing. You know, helicopters and all that. No, it's a different war today. The basic strategy. Naval and air bombardment, fake news. This is very important. People don't know this. The Americans and the British told their French underground, start spreading rumors. We're going to Calais. We're going to Calais. Patton is up in the north of Scotland. He may go into Belgium. Ooh, Patton's the #1 guy. Let's protect Belgium. They had parachutes that were parachuted into northern France that were dummies. with firecrackers on them that when they landed and hit the ground, they'd hear firing going off. The Germans and the French were like, the invasion's happening. There's the parachutes coming down. When the Germans found the parachutes, it was a little doll. But it worked. Airborne, 101st Airborne, parachutes behind the lines, behind the beaches, secure key points, 133,000 men on 5 beaches in just a few hours. It's incredible. And then set up docks for supply, move inland quickly, occupied Cherbourg and its ports. Remember, we're going from England to France. Once you're in France, you need to supply your troops. That means food, ammo, taking out casualties. It's setting up a city on the beaches. 5 beaches, 5 cities. All close, but somewhat separated. And Cherbourg, a big port, if we can get the Cherbourg port, then we can bring in major cargo for the true invasion and the push to France, push to Paris, finally the push to Berlin. This is Operation Overlord. Utah Beach, I'll cover first. There it is. It's interesting, Utah Beach. It's kind of shallow there, and there's some off-the-coast islands. When the Americans invaded Utah Beach, I'm not going to say anything's easy, but it was the easiest. It was not that heavily defended. The Americans came on board. The key to Utah Beach is there's a major highway that comes right off the beach. If we can get that beach, we can load trucks immediately. With the shallow, they can load a lot of trucks, and the tanks can come right on the beach and move on that coastal road. Let's get to the bridges, which are hopefully secured by the U.S. 101st Airborne. Utah went fairly well. St. Miracle-East, if you all saw The Longest Day, no, that's not red buttons. But they still have on the church the parachute hanging there. It's a beautiful town, excellent food. The French there love the Americans. Going to Normandy, if you can see it and visit it, it's right inland from the beach of Utah Beach, very, very close. The church is still there. It's a beautiful place. This is Omaha Beach. Not where the invasion per se was, but what I liked about the shot is you can see the cliffs in the background. That up there is where Point du Hoc was. And watch this. If you look, this is an artist rendering of the chaos at Omaha Beach. And you can see the cliffs in the background are almost those same cliffs. Like you said, war is hell. A famous shot of the landing crafts coming into Omaha Beach. This is a little town. I believe this is where the British were. I just don't know if it's Sword Beach or not, but the British beaches were not beaches per se, but they were towns. The coast of the English Channel is lined with very French villages, very beautiful towns. And if we can get into those towns and secure them, we get the logistics of the town, we get the supply, we get the ports where we can blow up ships, and the docks are already there, if you can imagine. So this is that beach. This is from Point du Hoc, looking over the cliff toward Omaha Beach. And this is Point du Hoc. A few points about Point du Hoc, a very famous piece of rock out there. The U.S. Army Rangers, there's nothing like them. They had to land from the coast. They're under heavy fire from the top of the cliffs. They had to climb up what is probably 304 feet straight up cliffs with Germans throwing grenades down on them and firing down on them. They did get up there to the top. There's a gun placement that was up there on Point du Hoc. There weren't as many guns as they expected. Interesting. The Germans hadn't fully set up the defenses yet. But Point du Hoc was a major success. If they did isolate certain, oops, wrong button. There's my son in one of the craters on Point du Hoc from the naval bombardment. We naval guns, big guns, 14-inch guns from the battleships, primarily destroyers and cruisers, hit this top of this hill. It is United States territory. It is protected by the United States. It is upkept by the United States. It is pretty much as it was in June 6th of 1944. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place. Juno Beach, the Canadians with their flowers. It is a beach. Here's another picture of their beach. You can see it's kind of grasses are tall, it's not beachy. It's kind of like, if anybody can relate, maybe like the North Carolina beaches. You know, this is not Daytona. You know, it's kind of weeds and fields. Germans were heavily fortifying this area. And here's some of the guns they had. These are not their largest guns, but you can see even the bombardment that, you know, these things were hit by shells. It didn't matter. Germans were loaded inside. They could fire heavy guns very quickly, and they could hit things miles out into the English Channel. So this is a force to be reckoned with. Here's one of the British invasion beaches. There's a tower there that is made of concrete about 5 stories tall. It's still there today. You can go in it and go up in it. And on every floor you go in, you can see the German defenses. And at the very top, they have this thing, which could be like a telescope that could look out to the channel. It's amazing. The defenses that the Germans built, many of them are still there. And it's amazing what you had to do. And of course, here's Omaha Beach, the American Cemetery. One of the most humbling places an American can ever go. It is American territory. It is maintained by the American government. It's a special organization that maintains all the cemeteries in the world of wherever Americans are buried. I was at the one outside of Anzio in Italy. It's amazing, these cemeteries. They're very, very special places. They have monuments and flowers, and they're kept up tremendously. Really special places. And then you look down from that cemetery, and there it is. There's the Omaha Beach. It's quite a ways down. You know, it's not anything like Saving Private Ryan, I agree. It's not like that. It was kind of a sloping down. They have walks that you can go down there, and when you go there, you can walk down there. Most of the ceremonies and stuff are up on the hill. But you walk down there, and yes, I got in the English Channel. I rolled up my pants, took off my shoes and socks, and I got in the water, and you're right, it was cold. It's cold water, but it is beautiful. Here's a blown up bunker. This is one of the villages, beautiful village. This is called Port Besson. That's between 2 of the beaches. And here's another look from Point du Hoc, looking over toward Utah Beach. And here is this is a statue from Dick Winters of the Easy Company of the 101st Airborne. You've probably seen Band of Brothers. This is a thing there that says, "Wars do not make men great, but they do bring out the greatness in good men." And there is a lot of monuments there. We saw one that was produced by Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg for the Band of Brothers. So there's a lot of monuments there. It is a very special place. It's where history happened, and it was the greatest invasion of all time, and we had to win it. There was no chance to lose it. It had to be won, and even when it was won, there was a lot more to do. There's the Pegasus Bridge. The Pegasus Bridge had to be taken. The British landed there were parachutes and also gliders. The gliders would land near the bridge, and they would all get out of their gliders, and they had to rush this bridge. They did not want the Germans to blow it up, and they did. They captured that bridge. It's a very famous bridge. It's been replaced since with a newer bridge right next to the old one. Very, very special place. That's one of the British's great successes there, which allowed us to drive toward Caen. C-A-E-N is how it's written. And that is a major city in France, and is famous for where Norman the Great had his battle with the French and the English. So history does repeat, and thankfully for veterans and heroes like we have here today, we did push through France, and we did liberate Paris and on across the Rhine into Germany, and the war was over by June of 45. So 1 year after the invasion, in 80 years ago, June of 44 to June of 45, the war was over. Hitler killed himself in May. So it went quick. Battle of the Bulge was December. So this is a quick end to the war once we got onto the land of Europe. So it's just a little bit of history here. This is what D-Day is all about. One last point, I just throw this out, I learned it just recently. I was down in Gettysburg for the American Battlefield Trust Annual Conference. And they talked about one of the Civil War veterans, one of the last, I think the last Civil War veteran, died in 1956. So, you know, it made me think that some of the veterans here today from World War II, and in their life, they had obviously World War I veterans, but there were Civil War veterans still alive. And in the Civil War, there was American Revolutionary veterans still alive. And all of them need to be treasured. They do stuff that most people would not do. I can't imagine the 19, 20, or 22 years old today going to battle and climbing the cliffs of Pointe du Hoc under gunfire. I can't see it. I did have here the average age of the invasion force was 26 years old, most of them 18 to 22. Very, very true statistics. Casualties, there were a lot, but I didn't want to get into that. And somebody asked me the casualties, you can't count because the British have their numbers, Americans have theirs. Omaha was very bad, Utah not so bad. And when you stop counting, because it was like after 24 hours or after a week or after a month, when the D-Day just kind of, we rolled into it. And soon it was one of the biggest cities in France with American, Canadian, and British occupying. We're bringing in ports, and they brought their own ports in that would drop in the water, and all the boats could tie up to that. It became all of a sudden a harbor on the English Channel. So there's a little bit of history, and I think I'll end it there, unless there's any questions. All right.
Before I nervously fly off the cuff with my closing remarks, can I ask any of the presenters to check their paperwork to see if they might have accidentally taken a couple of pages I had up here? And if not, I'll wait. All right, before we close out our ceremony, we would like to do just a kind of a quick snapshot, again, of the trips that our veterans here are taking. Joe and Ziggy will depart with the Greatest Generations group on May 22nd, sailing to England on the Queen Mary 2. Then they will ferry to Normandy. They'll arrive back home on June 9th. Al Perchetti and Al DiCarlo will fly to Hamburg, Germany, then sail along the coast of Europe to Normandy. They will travel with the National World War II Museum Group departing May 26th and returning on June 8th. George and Tom will fly out of Rochester to attend events at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, June 5th through the 7th. We want to thank our sponsors today, the Greatest Generations Foundation, the Gary Sinise Foundation, the National World War II Museum, and the American Airlines for so generously making these trips possible. Thank you to the Perinton Historical Society, Vicki Prophet, for hosting this event, and all of the museum volunteers for their help. Thank you to the Patriot Guard Riders of New York and the Honor Flight Dolls. And thank you to everyone coming out today to cheer our veterans on as we wish them safe travels. One thing I want to say is that as Americans, we all have a need for heroes. We like to recognize the efforts of our fellow countrymen. And far too often, when we look for heroes, we look in the wrong places. You look on a sports field, and I think I'm guilty of that as much as anybody, but you look at a sports field, maybe public office, maybe you look at somebody who just has more money than they could ever spend in 20 lifetimes, and you look up to them. I think we're very fortunate here, right here in our local community, that we have such heroes amongst us, like these veterans, our guests of honor, and our fellow veterans in the audience today. I'm pretty certain that if you asked any of these veterans If they're heroes, they tell you no. It makes them uncomfortable being called that. And they'll tell you that they're just here and they did their job, or they were here and they did their job. They felt the calling and they answered it. And as far as I'm concerned, that's what makes them heroes. So, again, thank you all for coming. Thank you to our veterans, and I wish you safe travels on your trips. Thank you.